I have a dead cat on my body. That's morbid. The microphone has a dead cat on it. So, yeah, that's what I'm referring to. Hello, and welcome. This is a bit of randomness, and my name is Jamie. In today's video, I wanted to do a book review of a book that I read about climate change, and then at the end, talk about some ideas that we as individuals can do to, make some lifestyle changes that can positively impact our climate. And so the book that I recently finished reading is called Imaginary Borders by Xiuhtezcahtl Martinez. Xiuhtezcatl is a Native American environmental and political activist, as well as an artist. He really uses his voice to teach people about social justice and environmental issues, and through his work, he aims to move people to take action that makes a difference towards these issues. And so, after I finished the book, I felt really moved to share my learnings, and that's why we're here today. And so the first thing I'll talk about is how Xiuhtezcatl really, throughout the book, he, gives a brief overview of climate change. He talks about how climate change is mainly caused by the extraction and the usage of fossil fuels. And fossil fuels, when they're burned, they emit greenhouse gases that increase our global temperatures. Since the Industrial Revolution, Xiuhtezcatl cited that global temperatures have risen 1.1 degrees Celsius, which is 33.98 degrees Fahrenheit. With the increase in our global temperature, we're seeing more frequent and more extreme droughts and heat waves, as well as hurricanes and floods, and all the damage that occurs to our homes, our land, the animals, our entire ecosystem as those events occur. And so Xiuhtezcatl does a really great job of creating that sense of urgency by discussing these things throughout his story. However, Xiuhtezcatl really wants to draw attention to the fact that climate change disproportionately affects communities of color. An example of that is in my own city, in Eugene, Oregon. There's a part of the city called West Eugene, and in this area, it is the population is primarily communities of color, as well as it's a low-income area, and they have these factories in this zip code, 97402, that produce like 96% of our air pollutions, and these factories themselves are getting away with it because of outdated zoning regulations and really loose air pollutant guidelines. And so the people in this area feel the effects of this because they're literally getting sick. And another example that Xiuhtezcatl talks about that shows how certain communities are placed in greater danger zones for these disasters that occur as our global temperatures rise. He goes to Hurricane Katrina, and how in New Orleans, the Black community primarily was in the highest danger zone for hurricanes. And so when Hurricane Katrina occurred, their community inflicted the greatest damage, and they had the least amount of resources to recover. So they were more impacted by this disaster.
People talk about Katrina being an equal opportunity storm. Didn't make a difference if you were black or white, rich or poor, but it wasn't exactly an equal storm. If you were a black homeowner, you were more than 3 times more likely to have lost your home in the flooding than if you were a white homeowner. And just like it wasn't an equal opportunity storm, it has not been an equal opportunity recovery.
When you think about if hurricanes are increasing and this sort of pattern is occurring across the United States through discriminatory city planning processes, then those communities of color are going to be at the greatest level of risk. Another thing that he cited was how, through these disasters, you're seeing these valuable basic resources being affected. So when we think about how extreme heat waves cause droughts, and then water becomes extremely precious, who gets access to that water is determined by social factors such as their income and their place in the world. So when we think about a third world country versus a first world country, in the United States, most people have access to water, but again, when you look at the hierarchy of like who has the cleanest water versus who has the dirtiest, you're going to see a pattern. People of color and the lowest income people getting exposed to the worst kinds of water. And then in the third world country, Xiuhtezcatl talked about how in Mexico, since there's been recent droughts, they're unfairly allocating water, and so the most affluent populations, they're using the most water, and yet they're paying the least amount of money, and the opposite is true for the less affluent areas, and it takes more time to get the water there, and they're having to pay extremely high amounts of money to get access to it, and they're getting less of it in general. And so these examples are just a few that really highlight how communities of color are more negatively impacted by climate change. Learning and reading these things, it can create feelings of like fear and anger, but Xiuhtezcatl does, I think, a really wonderful job of creating a sense of hope and showing people that individual steps can make great differences. And so one of the things that he really wants readers to come away with, I feel, is to recognize how, like, in order to make these changes, it's going to be uncomfortable, especially if you're in a place where you're surrounded by extreme convenience. To really care and be driven to make a difference, Xiuhtezcatl talks about the importance of being connected to your world, your environment, to the land, so that you have this sense of deep gratitude and wonder, and you see that the beauty of the fact that we get to live on this earth, and how at the end of the day, everything around us is created by stardust. When you really live with that understanding in your heart, then you will feel more moved to be thoughtful in your actions and make choices that might not be the most convenient, but ultimately have the greatest positive impact on our world. And when I was thinking about, okay, what can I do? I asked myself, well, what is the greatest source of greenhouse gas emissions? And perhaps it's something that is it within my control. And so I did a Google search and I looked up just that. What's the greatest source of greenhouse gas emissions? And the United States Environmental Protection Agency website popped up. And so it offered a very useful pie chart that visualized how transportation is the largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. So that's through driving cars and trains and boats and planes. And so when in the context of my life, if I think about, okay, what out of those things do I have control over, and what do many people in the United States have control over? And that is the usage of a car. And so when you think about what sort of alternatives do I have besides driving a a car that depends on fuels to run, well, you can go down, you can brainstorm some ideas and think about what is within my means. Perhaps you're in a place where you can afford, or you already have purchased a car that is electric. And so other options that you could look at are, what is my ability around carpooling with people on my daily commute to work? Or how can I incorporate more walking into my routine to get to some sort of place that I aim to go, whether that be work, or it could be to the grocery store, or it could be for an outing. If walking doesn't seem desirable because it takes a lot longer, then many people are turning to bicycling. And that's actually something that I do. And so I bike everywhere, primarily now in Eugene, Oregon. And before that, I was using the public transit system. And now for some people, you might find like you're in a position where you're already doing some of these things. Maybe you're using a public transit system, maybe you're already biking, maybe you're already walking, but that's not because you have necessarily a choice. It's because of your position that you don't have a choice. And that's sort of what it was for me, and what it is for me, in that I bike because I don't have a car. I can't afford a car. But I can, change my feelings about, like, instead of feeling down about the fact that, like, oh man, I wish I had a car because that might give me more freedom, that might save me more time, I can view it from this lens of, like, when I bike, I am positively impacting our climate because I'm not contributing to emitting these greenhouse gases that occur when you drive a car. And so I feel pride in that choice, and I feel like on those days where I feel lots of jealousy and envy because it's raining and I'm cold and I don't want to be on my bike, I can, find that renewed sense of appreciation for this is making a difference. I highly encourage all of you watching to check this book out for yourself, because you might find, different, extremely meaningful teachings from it than the ones that I did. And I encourage you to go to the Environmental Protection Agency website and check out that page, and I'll leave the link in the description box, but to see like what other sources are contributing to the greenhouse gas emissions, and is there something I can do in my daily life to make a difference. I would love to hear more ideas people have to share, and so please leave your ideas and your thoughts in the comment section below. And thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. See you next time.